morning, viewers. This is George Callis at This Sea Ranch Life. Today we've got someone new in our part of the world. We have Helen Pataki, who is the relatively new executive director of the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy, RCLC. Well, Helen, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You bet, and welcome to the new job, which I understand you've been here a month or so.
Yes, I just started at the end of June.
Fantastic, fantastic. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in RCLC. Why RCLC? Were you on the hunt for this job, or did they find you, or was it just serendipity?
I returned. I've been a landowner and a member of the Guala community for many years, but really just part time when I visited. But I came back full time last year. And it was actually a friend of mine who sent me a job announcement, said, "Hey, isn't this in your neck of the woods?" And I looked at it, and it really kind of aligned with things that I like to do and skills that I thought I had. So I applied, and here I am.
Fantastic. That's great. And the month, and you've been off and running on your first month. How's all that going? You're learning the pieces and the nuts and bolts and everything.
Yes, I come as we may talk about later. I come from a background of international development,
Yeah.
so a little bit different than being here, but actually, in fact, quite similar in terms of the working with community, building communities, working with land, preserving, restoring, things like that is really very similar. So yeah, I think my first month or so in, I've been doing a lot of meeting people who are important to RCLC and the organization that we are, and the land that we're stewarding, and continuing that. I think very important to meet people from the beginning, and learning about land trusts and conservation, specifically in California, specifically in Mendocino County.
Yeah. Back up here a little bit. You mentioned that you were in international development, and did you have a career at USAID, which is, hold on, I know the acronym, I know what it does, but I can't remember what it stands
Yes, the
for.
United States Agency for International Development.
Correct.
Yes. So yes, up until last year, I think probably many of your listeners are familiar with the saga now of
Yes.
USAID and what has happened with the new administration, which I think is in fact terrible, and did cause lives lost in how it was done. But yes, in any case, I had worked just about 19 years for USAID, ending relatively abruptly last year. And my
Wow.
last post, I was in Mozambique as the mission director.
Wow. 19 years.
Yes.
That's like a real career. That's
Yes.
You were probably figuring that was going to be your career and you'd wrap it up there one day.
Yes, I'd always intended to come back to Gualala, but I was thinking it'd be in just a few more years' time. But here I am earlier than expected,
Yeah.
and happy to be here.
Well, you have a good attitude about it. I'm not sure everybody would be as settled with it as you seem to be. But you have this connection to Gualala and the Mendocino coast also. Explain about that. Did you live here at a time, or you're familiar with or you've lived here, or you're familiar, or both?
Yes. Yes. Well, what it is I actually, so I'm a product of the West Coast. So I was born in Oregon. When I was when I was younger, then we moved to Alaska. It's because my father was in construction, and so we were in Alaska, and then we moved to California, to the Bay Area when I was in middle school. And all along through there, it was a common thing. My father really instilled this love of the water and the ocean for me. We would always visit the ocean. Oregon used to go to Tillamook and saltwater taffy and things like that. But really overarching is my father's love of fishing. So we used to come out to the coast
Ah,
fishing, and I would come with him. Even, I'll tell you a quick story is that I have a, healthy respect and reverence for the emergency services, because we came out to Fort Ross, I think when I was around 19 years old. And and while we were fishing, or my dad was fishing, and I was kind of going around on the rocks, I fell down. I toppled down the side of the cliff into the ocean. My dad had to pull me out, but I got one of those helicopter rides into Santa Rosa, and
wow.
it was pretty quick work from the rangers that happened to go by. And anyway, it was a thing. But I was really very grateful to those rescuers that day, and have lived to tell the story.
Yeah, and you saw, as beautiful as the land is, you saw a dangerous piece of the land
Yes,
and
yes.
ocean,
It was
not intentionally.
the barnacles on the rocks that caught my foot that caused me to overstep and then tumble down.
There it is. There's our message. Be careful around the ocean and our
That's right.
bluffs and everything else. They're
That's
beautiful, but you can get hurt out there.
never
Let's
turn
talk
your
a little
back.
bit about,
Never
yeah,
turn your
never
back
turn
on
your
the ocean.
back.
Yes.
That's a good rule in life, I would say. But RCLC, for our viewers, has been doing land conservancy for quite a while now, and it's grown a lot. Give us a little bit of background. What pieces of land does RCLC manage on behalf of the public, and where do you see our RCLC going in the future? A little bit about your vision.
Sure, no problem. I first of all, this organization RCLC was started in 1992, so it's more than 3 decades old now. And I think we're so lucky. We actually have one of our founding members still on the board of directors. So that's Bob Rudemuller. Um, and I think it was I don't know how it was started. I should ask him whether it was around a coffee table or some late night somewhere or whatever. But I mean, really, this organization has worked to protect, restore, and share property. And I think the properties that we do have are the Bluff Trail, which many know is that's
Yeah.
relatively short trail right behind Trinks and that area, Dolphin Gallery right back there. That I would go to when I was young as well. We'd get a coffee or a chai or something from Trinks, and I'd go and sit and look for whales on one of those benches. Um,
Uh-huh.
then so it's known and much beloved, but takes a lot of work to keep it up. Same for Cook's Beach. I actually live relatively close to Cook's Beach.
Okay.
And you can see, especially in the summertime, there are families down there. There's kids, there's dogs running around. It's well used and much loved. We also have Hearn Gulch, which is just a bit north of that. And that was the one place actually that I had never visited prior to taking on this job. And I went there recently, and it is stunning. If you or your listeners have not been to Hearn Gulch, you can walk out from it's not well marked, I think intentionally at this point. So, but there is a turnout there that you can park, and you walk out on the bluff, and just the views of the Pacific and the rocks there, just really beautiful. And then there's an area also have to be a little bit fit to take that rope rail case down to the beach there.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's quite stunning. And it's an area just south of Saunders Landing, where that Hearn Gulch is. And then, of course, we have Mill Bend, and I know that's like our biggest acquisition to date. And I think we acquired it in 21 or 22. It's
Mhm.
ongoing work here, but we are actually, and I'll take just a quick moment to plug an event that we're going to have on October 10th. It will be last year. Your viewers or listeners might remember that we had an event in October called Restoring the River.
Yes. Yeah.
Next year we're going to have one that's just a follow on to that one. So restoring was the river was about the estuary access, down by the river and that area near the Woollella River. And this year in October now we'll have one talking about pathways within the preserve. So basically the trails of the upper Millbend area, the part on the east side of Highway 1. And we're working on the trails there and things like that. So those are our areas to date. And I think that we've had some of them many years and some of them newer, but all of them continue to require our focus and attention.
Yeah, fantastic. And the Mill Bend Preserve, uh, there's much more work to be done there uh, over time. So you'll continue to develop that property for use, appropriate use.
Yes, exactly. And so, as anyone who has built a house in this area or otherwise needed a permit for anything, which is quite a lot of
Yeah,
things, those things take a lot of time. And it's no different
yeah,
in the conservation world. So it requires, even building trails and public access and things like that, requires a lot of analysis of the surroundings, of the native plants, of sort of the impact, the assessments on the environment, things like that. And even, when you have public access, you think about where a public restroom might be and how that will work and things like, so all of that takes time.
Yeah.
then you have to do the permits for it. So it has to go through a
Right.
number of agencies, like there's so many out there,
Right.
whether it's
Like
the Coastal Commission.
the coastal
Exactly.
commission is probably
Exactly. And
the big one.
Caltrans and others.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll just do a shout out to our grantors for the projects that we're working on. Is one is the State Coastal Conservancy is quite a big organization within the California government that really helps not just our organization, but many to build out these areas. And the same for the California Fish and Wildlife, which is helping us with the estuary side.
Right. Right, right. Speaking of the state and funding and everything, explain to us a little bit about how how RCLC is funded. How do you get money? You acquire properties, you do work on properties, you have staff, and you have people. You have a lot of things. Where's your funding come from?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because in fact, conservation is not cheap. As is really anything valuable in life. Nothing comes super cheap.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think here, I will just say that we have had amazing donors over time, many who are in your community and others in the area that are contributing to us. So we have a mix of funding here at this time. We have the grantors, as I just mentioned, these grants from state agencies or local government agencies, things like that. Right now we have two. We just finished one that was also from the State Coastal Conservancy that was on fire resilience. But when grants come, they're for specific purposes. So right now we have one that's specifically for developing the Mill Bend area and the coastal trail, which hopefully will link Mill Bend to that bluff trail. And then also the estuary, and doing that in it's very sensitive habitat, and trying to bring back the coho salmon and
Right.
the steelhead and things like, and sort of making sure people don't step on, eggs of, various species. So, and plants and things like that. So building how we'll do that with boardwalks. I think that was explained in part at last year's meeting.
Yeah.
So all of that, those are specific purposes. But, I think our most valuable funders are people like you, people who give. They give small amounts, large amounts. They give one-offs. They give annually. They give monthly, or for big purchases. When we bought Mill Bend, we had a lot of people who contributed for that additional funding that really helped us to buy. So that private funding that comes from viewers or listeners that you have, or for people in the community, that amount allows us more flexibility, whether it's for investment for new properties. And like many other land trusts, we have started an investment fund that will enable us to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because I think when Mill Bend came along, we weren't quite as prepared for that. Hence, there was a lot of fundraising, and it worked great. But like many other land trusts, you kind of want to be prepared for something valuable, because it's hard to get that seed money to buy something. But then also, it's conservation, all this stewardship of these properties over time, it's forever, and you want to keep them. Cook's Beach, I'll give an example. Cook's Beach is a beautiful place, lovely, family friendly, pet friendly place to visit. The stairs, which we maintain, that go down, they're always under stress that way, whether it's from the water coming through or people going through. And so that takes time and money and effort to keep that up, which we do.
Yeah. Constant maintenance.
So very grateful for the support that we get, and always happy for more.
Yeah. Okay, tell viewers a little bit, because you've said here's what you're doing. You've got some staff, you've got people involved, but here I am, just the guy off the street now. How can I become involved in RCLC? Could I be a volunteer? Obviously, you mentioned that private donations are very important to you, so that's one way I could do it. But beyond that, how can I get involved with RCLC?
Yes, it's a good question, and particularly because we really do rely on our volunteers for a lot. We do have excellent volunteers that show up every week, all the time, to steward those lands that we're talking about. We have a designated volunteer steward for each of the properties that we have. For the Bluff Trail, for Cook's Beach, Hearn Gulch. And so for those areas, they organize volunteers, whether it's, and this, by the way, we also we didn't mention, but the cemetery that's within Mill Bend area. We also do have volunteers that we that take care of the cemetery and keep it weed whacked, and respectfully so, and have tried to bring that cemetery back as most respectfully and historically accurately as possible.
Right.
And so, yeah, so volunteering, there's either you could be a volunteer for one of these areas and do it kind of on a regular basis, meeting every Tuesday and pulling up weeds or picking up trash, things like that. Or there's one-off events. We recently did a trash pickup event that had been actually the idea of the Iffy, who's the kayak, center owner or operator, and there was this big trash area, and it was really it's out of our properties or stewardship areas.
It was up on Old Stage Road, was it not?
Exactly, kind of where I think Fish Rock was. Yes,
but,
and so
pretty far up the ridge there.
Pretty far up the ridge, but it was actually quite. It was I can't remember exactly. It was a number of trailer loads of trash that were taken out. At CNS Waste, they allowed us to bring the trash for free, which was it was a community effort that way.
Yeah.
And I would say about 10 or 12 people showed up to pick up trash, and it was I myself was there as well. It was my first week on the job. And I would recommend gloves and a mask sometimes for some of this, but it's really satisfying to see an area that's full of trash and then suddenly clean. And it was, I think, as a group effort, very satisfying for the group to see that. So, happy to. It's not really our core mission, but I think it was a community role that people were. It's something that you can do in a few hours and really get a good sense of contribution. So that's another area. I would also say, I wanted to say that, in terms of how you can be involved, if we were talking about the areas we steward, and there's always, the thought of if there's other areas out there, and not to say that we're, actively looking for something, but if there are also areas, other opportunities to steward and to, if you're a landowner or someone who knows of a particular area that would be particularly valuable in terms of the environment or ecological or as part of a watershed or things like that, we're always interested to talk to people like that and to understand more about those areas and whether we can play a role in helping to ensure its value as part of the ecosystem here.
Yeah. Where will people go? Let's say they want to learn more about RCLC, or they want to volunteer, or hopefully they want to make a donation. Where do I go to do that? Where do I go online? How can I find out about that?
Good question. We have a website that's rclc.org. So that's on the website. We also are active on Facebook and often Instagram. And so I think that any of those areas, but the best place would be rclc.org. And there's there's I think a button that you can click that will send an email if you're interested, for example, in volunteering or donating or whatever, or just information. There's a button that you can click that will send an email to one of our staff who will get back to you.
Plus, I can get your newsletter. I think I can subscribe to that from your website.
Yes,
is that not
you
correct?
Get the newsletter, and it's one just came out, and we're looking at sending out a community report soon, which is kind of like an annual report. And then I think our monthly report, our newsletters come out every quarter or every other month. I forget the exact consistency, but they come out regularly, and we update.
Yeah.
And I think might be a QR code on that you can also scan with your phone.
Even better. Well, I'm going to tell listeners about one of my favorite things to have ever done in the RCLC sphere, and we mentioned it before, is the kayaks down at Mill Bend, and it's kind of fun to do the kayak, but I will warn people, it's work to paddle. If you're not out there always, and I'm not regularly paddling kayaks or doing that sort of thing, I don't fish or whatever. It's work to move yourself in that kayak. However, it's fun, and I made it even 10 times more fun because I had my grandson, who was 3 at the time, in the kayak with us, and I don't think he'd ever done anything like that. It was pretty cool. So I encourage people to. And the kayaks that kayak rental place wouldn't be there except if RCLC had acquired Mill Bend to allow that to happen.
Exactly. And I just wanted to say, as I said, we were, restore, preserve, and share. And the share is a big piece of that. So taking kayaks on the river like that, to be able to see the birds that are flying around, or the river otters, if you're lucky, and to kind of just get that sense of forest and that sense of the smells and the wind and going through, I think it's really lovely. And so I think going back to how people can get involved, coming to our events or just visiting our sites. Like I'm
Yeah.
happy to see people on the Bluff Trail, happy to see people at Cook's Beach or here walking around at Mill Bend. All of our sites are open that are, that I've shared that you can go through and many of them you can
Right.
bring your dog, just
Yeah.
pick up after your dog, what you bring it out, pack it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really
Absolutely.
beautiful spots and we encourage visitors.
Thanks so much. Folks, we've been speaking with Helen Pataki. Helen's the new Executive Director of Redwood Coast Land Conservancy, RCLC. And as you've heard, they're doing all kinds of wonderful work. And Helen's up to the top of her waders, I guess, trying to absorb the job. No, I think she's doing a great job. And Helen, thanks so much for taking some time and sharing about RCLC and your involvement, your leadership.
Thank you so much, George. Great talking to you.
You betcha. Take care now.